Out here, some stories refuse to die. They drift across lonely roads hidden beneath desert stars and waiting in the shadows of forgotten places. Welcome to the Mesquite Lantern. Pull up a chair, stay close to the light, and listen carefully. Some legends are still alive. Welcome to the Mesquite Lantern. I'm your host, Vixen Cross. Let's get into our first story. Today's stories, we're talking about 2 urban legends from South Texas, along with one of our listener stories. So without further ado, let's get into our first story, The Red-Eyed Beast of the Brush Country. In the lonely brush countries of South Texas, where mesquite trees twisted like skeletal hands and coyotes sang beneath the moon, there was an old ranch. A few people dared to visit after dark. The ranch belonged to Don Ernesto Salazar, a stubborn cattleman whose family worked the land for generations. His property stretched for miles across the dry earth, dotted with cattle, windmills, and abandoned sheds left behind by previous owners. For years, life on the ranch was peaceful. Then, livestock started dying. It began with a single goat found near a dry creek bed. There wasn't a scratch on the animal's body except for 2 deep punctures in its neck. Its eyes were wide with terror, and there was almost no blood left in its carcass. A sour metallic smell lingered around it, and the hide felt unnaturally cold despite the rising morning heat. Everyone blamed coyotes, but coyotes didn't kill like that. A week later, 3 more goats were found dead. Then a sheep, then another. Word spread through the nearby towns. The chupacabra. The chupacabra, whispered the old ranchers. Younger men laughed. That's just a story. But the laughter stopped when the attacks continued. Every victim looked the same. No signs of a struggle. No flesh eaten. Only puncture wounds. Only blood missing. The summer deepened. Fear settled over the ranch. One evening, Ernesto's grandson Miguel arrived from Rio Grande Valley to help investigate. Miguel was 23 and studied wildlife biology. He believed every mystery had a logical explanation. There are no monsters, Grandpa. Ernesto simply nodded. Maybe, but something is killing my animals. The next morning, they inspected the latest attack. Near the carcass, they found tracks. Miguel knelt beside them. Footprints weren't canine. They weren't feline. They almost looked human, but thinner, with long clawed toes pressed into the dirt. Miguel felt a chill despite the Texas heat. That's strange. Ernesto crossed himself. That night, they set up cameras around the livestock pen. They waited, but nothing happened. The next night, the cameras only recorded darkness and blowing dust. On the 3rd night, the ranch dogs began barking, then yelping, then silence. The sudden quiet felt worse than the noise, as if the entire ranch were holding its breath. Miguel grabbed a flashlight and a rifle. Ernesto followed close behind them. The moon hung low and yellowed over the brush. As they approached the goat pen, they heard a strange clicking sound. Click, click, click. Like bones snapping together. The sound echoed through the still air and seemed to come from every direction at once. Miguel swept his flashlight across the darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then 2 red eyes reflected back, far too high off the ground. The creature slowly stepped into view. The chupacabra emerged from the darkness near a goat pen with glowing red eyes and spines along its back under the moonlight. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. It stood nearly 5 feet tall. Its skin was gray and hairless, stretched tightly over visible ribs. Sharpened spine ran down its back from its neck to its tail. Its arms were long and ended with curved claws. Its head resembled a cross between a coyote and a reptile. The skin glistened with a greasy sheen, and foul odor of wet fur, decay, and a stagnant water drifted from its body. Its eyes glowed like burning coals. The thing stared at them. Neither side moved. The air felt heavy. Miguel could feel sweat trickling down his back while goosebumps pricked across his arm. Then the creature opened its mouth. Rows of needle-like teeth gleamed in the moonlight. Strings of saliva hung between them, catching the pale light. A low growl emerged, not loud, not threatening, just wrong. A sound that seemed to vibrate inside Miguel's chest and rattled his teeth. Ernesto whispered a prayer. The creature suddenly lunged. Its claws tore furrows through the dirt as it sprang forward with a terrifying speed. Miguel fired. The rifle clacked through the night. The beast vanished into the brush, then it chased after it. Branches wiped their faces. Mesquite thorns tore at their clothes, scraping their skin. Ahead, they could hear something crashing through the darkness, accompanied by wet, raspy breathing. Then everything went silent. The trail ended at an old abandoned well hidden among the trees. Miguel shined his flashlight inside. A damp, earthy odor drifted upward from the darkness below. The beam disappeared into darkness. Then something moved below. A pair of red eyes looked up. The creature was watching them from the depths. Before Miguel could react, it scrambled down the tunnel, branching from one side of the well, and disappeared. The next morning, Miguel gathered several ranch hands. They lowered ropes and climbed into the well. What they found beneath the ranch frightened them more than any creature itself. Hidden under the earth was a network of ancient tunnels. The air was thick and humid, clinging to their skin and making every breath feel heavy. The walls were lined with strange claw marks. Animal bones littered the ground. Goat skulls, deer skulls, even coyote remains. Many appeared decades old. Something had been living there for a very long time. At the deepest point of the tunnels, they discovered a chamber. The smell was overwhelming, rotting flesh, damp earth, and death. The stench coated the back of Miguel's throat and made his eyes water. Scattered throughout the room were dozens of bones and dried carcasses. Something cracked beneath the brutes, with a sharp snap that echoed through the darkness. Then Miguel noticed something else. Eggs, large, leathery, nearly size of watermelon. Some were broken, some remained intact. Their surfaces glistened with a slick film, and several twitched almost imperceptibly in the flashlight's beams. An underground chamber beneath the ranch was filled with bones, claw-marked walls, and large mysterious eggs illuminated by flashlight beams. Suddenly, a terrible shriek echoed through the tunnels. The sound was so loud that the dust rained from the ceiling. The shriek reverberated through the stone and stabbed into their ears, leaving them dizzy. The chupacabra had returned. The beast charged from the darkness, red eyes blazed. Its claws scraped, sparked from the stone. The grinding screech from the claws against the rock filled the tunnels. The ranch hands fled in terror. Miguel caught a glimpse of its jaws opening and then shut, spraying a foul breath that smelled like blood and decay. Miguel and Ernesto barely escaped the tunnels before the creature reached them. As they climbed from the well, rough stone tore at their hands, and the dust filled their lungs. The entrance partly collapsed behind them. The shrieking continued from underground for several minutes, then silence. For days afterwards, no one returned to the well. Eventually, Ernesto hired a crew to seal it with tons of concrete and stone. The attack stopped. Months passed, then years. The ranch became peaceful once more. Most people assumed the creature had died beneath the earth, but Ernesto never believed it. One autumn evening, nearly 10 years later, Miguel returned to visit. The old ranch was quiet. The cattle grazed peacefully. The sun set. He walked alone towards the place where the well had once stood. The concrete seal remained untouched, or so it seemed. Near the edge, half buried in the dirt, Miguel noticed a fresh footprint. 3 long clawed toes, far larger than any animal he knew. His stomach tightened. He slowly looked towards the distant brush, far away between the mesquite trees. 2 tiny red lights stared back, watching, waiting. Then they vanished into the darkness. And from somewhere deep within the Texas nights came a faint sound of clicking. Click, 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 as if something old and hungry still roamed the borders in search for its next victim. So, chupacabra stories were very, very popular in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. I myself struggled with this story because if some of you from the early 2000s remember a show, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, which was the first time I ever heard of a chupacabra, Billy kept pronouncing it as a chupamavede. And instinctively, that is how I referred to it for many, many years, just for fun and nostalgia. This story was fun to read, but admittedly, trying to separate chupacabra from chupamavede was very, very hard. But I was so entertained by it, and I hope you guys were entertained by it too. Before getting into our next 2 stories, I would like to just say thank you guys for listening so much. And if you want to submit your own stories to be read aloud, then please submit your stories to themidarc@gmail.com. That's THEMIDARC@gmail.com. And another huge thank you to everybody who stayed. I know we went on a 2-week hiatus due to personal family matters and also through the name change of the podcast. We did so just to make us easier to find on places like YouTube and Spotify. The Midnight Archives was a very good name for a horror story podcast, but there are also so many out there. So we changed it to something a little closer. The mesquite lantern, low and eerily burning, it can cast a very scary shadow or illuminate your ways through the darkness. And mesquite trees are something that are everywhere in the South Texas area. So it felt a little more personal and a little closer to home. And with that, we will get into our next story. La Tesigua, the woman behind the mesquite moon. The old men of South Texas and northern Mexico will tell you that every stretch of lonely road has a story. Some speak of phantom hitchhikers. Others whisper about La Llorona or El Charro Negro. But ranchers who have worked in the Rio Grande brush country for generations speak of another spirit, one they fear even more. They call her La Tesigua. Unlike many legends, La Tesigua doesn't hunt everyone. She chooses only men, especially those who have wandered too far into temptation. Some say she was once a beautiful young woman who was betrayed by every lover she ever had. Others insist she was never human at all, but an ancient spirit older than the mesquite trees themselves. Whatever the truth is, everyone agrees on one thing. If you hear a woman laughing alone beneath the moon, don't answer. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Road. October had finally cooled in the Rio Grande Valley. The scorching summer heat had given way to crisp evenings where the wind carried the scent of damp earth and wild sage. That 28-year-old Daniel Herrera worked long days repairing windmills and fences across isolated ranches between Mission and the river. He laughed whenever old ranch hands would warn him about the local legends. La Tesigua, he joked. She's probably just somebody's crazy ex. The older men never laughed. One elderly rancher simply stared into his coffee. I buried my brother because of her. Daniel assumed the old man suffered from dementia. He changed the subject. Chapter 2: The Woman in White. A week later, Daniel worked later than expected. By the time he pocketed his tools, darkness had swallowed the countryside. His GPS lost signal immediately. Only one gravel road remained between him and the highway. The moon was enormous. Silver light washed over endless fields. As his truck rolled slowly through the darkness, he saw someone standing beside the road. A woman, barefoot, long black hair. A flowing white dress moved even though the air was completely still. Daniel slowed. "You okay?" The woman never looked up. Instead, she laughed, softly, almost playful. Then she stepped into the brush. Daniel frowned. "Hey!" he climbed out. Nothing, no footprints, no movement. Only the mesquite branches swaying gently. Then, giggles, somewhere deeper. He followed. Chapter 3: The Impossible Forest. The brush seemed different, thicker. The moonlight became strangely bright. Daniel could no longer hear insects, no coyotes, no birds, not even the wind, only laughter. Always ahead, but every time he caught a glimpse of the white fabric between the trees, the woman disappeared again. He walked nearly 30 minutes before realizing something impossible. His truck was gone. The road had vanished. Only endless brush surrounded him. Then he heard her voice. "You finally came." It sounded gentle, kind, almost familiar. Daniel turned. She stood 20 feet away. Her face was hidden behind long black hair. She slowly lifted one pale hand. "Come closer." Without realizing why, he obeyed. Chapter 4: Beauty Beyond Human. As he approached, the woman slowly brushed her hair aside. Daniel forgot how to breathe. She was impossibly beautiful. Her skin glowed in the moonlight. Dark eyes shimmered silver. Her smile seemed warm, comforting. Every fear disappeared. He reached out and touched his cheek. "You've been lonely," he nodded. "I know. I can make it disappear." Her voice felt like music. Daniel suddenly couldn't remember why he had come into the woods. He couldn't remember work. He couldn't remember home. Only her. Her smile wider. Then something wasn't right. Her fingers were far too long. Her nails curved like claws. Her smile stretched impossibly wide. Daniel blinked. For a horrifying second, her face changed. Wrinkled skin, rotting teeth, empty black eye sockets. Then beautiful again, as if nothing happened. Chapter 5: Don't look into her eyes. Daniel remembered the rancher's warning. Never meet her eyes. Too late. The moment he looked into them, the world disappeared. He stood inside a beautiful hacienda, music playing, friends laughing. His late grandmother smiled at him. Everything he had ever wanted surrounded him. The woman wore a wedding dress now. She reached for his hand. "We can stay here forever." Daniel smiled. Then something smelled rotten. His grandmother wasn't blinking. The music repeated the same three notes. Everyone at the table smiled without moving. Flies crawled across the floor. The woman's smile slowly widened. Too wide. Her jaw cracked. Her eyes turned completely black. One by one, everyone's heads twisted backwards. Bones snapped. Laughter became screams. The illusion shattered. Daniel stood alone beneath the twisted mesquite trees. The beautiful woman was gone. Its body was impossibly tall. Its arms hung almost to the ground. Its neck bent sideways with loud cracking sounds. Long black hair floated upward like it was underwater. Its face looked almost human except for the mouth stretched from ear to ear. Rows of yellow teeth filled impossible grin. Its eyes contained no whites, only darkness. The creature whispered, "You looked." Then it laughed. Its sound echoed from every direction. Daniel ran. Chapter 6. The Chase. He crashed through cacti. Mesquite branches tore at his clothes. Behind him, bare footsteps, slow, never hurried. Crunch, crunch, crunch. She always remained exactly the same distance away. Daniel reached a clearing. His truck sat in the center. Headlights glowed. The engine was running. Relief flooded over him. He sprinted, grabbed the door. He opened it. Inside sat the woman, smiling. "You forgot me." The truck doors slammed shut by themselves. The engine died. Everything went dark. Daniel never came home. The sheriff's deputies searched 3 days. Volunteers searched another week. Helicopters flew over every ranch. Nothing. Finally, they discovered his truck parked perfectly beside the gravel road. The keys remained in the ignition. His wallet lay on the driver's seat. His cell phone had held full battery. The last picture on it showed nothing but darkness, except far in the background, someone stood among the mesquite trees, a woman in white, smiling. Chapter 7. The Old Rancher Speaks. Months later, the elderly rancher who had warned Daniel returned to the site. He removed his hat, placed it on the hood, and quietly whispered, "I'm sorry, son." The young deputy asked, "You really believe some ghost took him?" The old man sighed. "No." "What then?" He looked towards the moonlit brush. "Ghosts haunt places. This thing," he swallowed, "hunts." Epilogue. The Laughing Woman. To this day, truck drivers traveling isolated ranch roads between the Rio Grande and the brush country occasionally report strange encounters. Some hear laughter that seem to move alongside their vehicles. Some see a woman walking barefoot beside the road dressed in white, her hair long, hiding her face. Most keep driving. A few stop. Those who stop often return home, refusing to speak about what they had seen. Others are never seen again. The old families still pass down the same warning from one generation to the next. If you are driving alone beneath a bright full moon and a beautiful woman waves for you to stop, don't roll down your windows, don't follow the laughter, and whatever you do, don't look into her eyes. Because if the woman on the lonely road is truly La Tesigua, By sunrise, there may be nothing left of you but an abandoned truck, a trail of footprints that ends in the mesquite brush, and laughter drifting across the South Texas night, waiting for the next driver foolish enough to answer it. This last story is from one of our listeners, JP, and this is his grandmother's true story about what had happened to her when she was a child living in Mexico. This story I'm about to tell you happened to my grandmother when she was around 11 years old in the early 1950s. My grandmother lived with her family in Monterrey, Mexico. Back then, many children didn't go to school, especially if their families couldn't afford it. My grandmother and her family were extremely hardworking people, but they could barely make ends meet. It was the summer of 1951 when a family friend of my great-grandparents came to visit. She lived on the other side of the country, and traveling was expensive at the time. She was a very kind woman, and her husband was also a good man. Together, they had 2 children and owned a small convenience store. That day, she asked my great-grandmother if my grandmother could come live with them for the summer. She promised that my grandmother would have her own room and would be paid to babysit their children while they worked at their convenience store. Since my great-grandparents had known them for many years, my great-grandma agreed. My grandmother was thrilled. She could finally travel somewhere new and earn money to buy herself some new clothes. She packed the few belongings she owned and left with the family. A day later, they arrived at their home. The woman showed my grandmother her very own room and explained to her what her responsibilities would be. She would cook for the children, clean the house, and make sure the children were taken care of while the parents worked. My grandmother was more than happy to help, and she had already been doing chores for her own family while her grandparents were at work. After the woman finished explaining everything, she suddenly became very serious. She told my grandmother never to leave her room at night. If she needed to use the restroom, she would have to use a bucket kept inside the room. In the morning, she would empty it into the outhouse behind the house, since they didn't have indoor bathroom. Being a curious 11-year-old, my grandmother asked why. The woman walked her to the back window of the house and pointed towards the old house next door. There are a group of old women living there, she said. They're involved in witchcraft. My grandmother stayed quiet, nodded, and agreed to obey. Several weeks passed and everything was fine. She completed her chores every day, cared for the children, and was treated like one of the family. Every Sunday, the woman paid her for her work. Then one night, everything changed. My grandmother couldn't sleep because she heard strange noises coming from the house next door. During the entire time she had been there, not a single sound had ever come from that house. She began to think the woman had only told her the story to scare her and that the house was abandoned. But it was an old house, withered, and it looked like it was falling apart. But on this particular night, the sounds echoed inside like never before. Unable to resist her curiosity, my grandmother broke the only rule they had given her. She quietly left her bedroom, walked into the living room to see if anybody else was awake, but everyone was asleep. Slowly, she made her way to the back of the house and looked through the window. What she saw that night changed her life forever. Inside the neighboring house stood a group of women dressed entirely in black dresses and hooded cloaks. Candlelight flickered around the room as they chanted a language my grandmother had never heard. It wasn't Spanish, it wasn't English. She knew a little English and could understand some of it, but the language was something completely different. She was petrified. She wanted to run, but her body refused to move. She watched as the woman formed a circle around the other woman standing in the center while conjuring an eerie chant. Then, to my grandmother's horror, the woman in the middle slowly reached up, removed both of her eyes with her fingers, She started screaming in agony. The chanting grew louder. The woman began transforming into a bird-like creature. Cold sweat poured down the grandmother's face. The creature still had a woman's facial features, but the rest of her body became something unnatural. The other woman continued chanting as though nothing horrifying had happened. Suddenly, my grandmother snapped out of her fear. Before anyone noticed her, she quietly ran back to her room as fast and quietly as she could. She closed the door without making a sound, crawled beneath the blankets, and prayed while trembling uncontrollably. She cried until she finally fell asleep. The next morning, she woke up early as usual and began her daily chores. The woman and her husband were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when they noticed her. The woman immediately asked if she was feeling all right, because she looked pale, exhausted, and her eyes were swollen. My grandmother told them everything she had seen. Both of them looked at each other in absolute horror. The woman quietly said, "That's why I told you not to leave your room at night." My grandmother apologized for disobeying. The woman gently shook her head. "There is no need to apologize," she said. "I should have explained it more clearly why I warned you." The couple sat her down and finally told her the truth. About 2 years after they had moved into the house, a group of women moved in next door. The townspeople believed they practiced witchcraft, so everyone avoided them and simply let them be. Late at night, strange chanting and terrifying howls could be heard coming from their house. No one ever confronted them. As long as no one bothered them, they never bothered anyone else. The family had actually been saving money for a few years so they could eventually move away from them. From that day forward, my grandmother never left her room at night again. Sometimes she would wake up to the chanting and horrifying howls drifting through the darkness from next door. Every time she heard them, she would hide beneath her blankets, pray, cry, and eventually fall asleep. Eventually, summer came to an end. Although she had grown attached to the children and the family who treated her so kindly, part of her was relieved to finally return home. When she arrived home, my great-grandparents asked her how everything had gone. My grandmother told them everything she had witnessed and how she had heard chanting and howling many nights afterwards. They dismissed it as the imagination of a frightened child. About a year later, the same family returned to visit. They asked my grandmother if she wanted to spend another summer with them. She politely refused. By then, a convenience store had opened within walking distance of their home, and she had already found a job there. The family understood why she didn't want to return. My great-grandmother, Francesca, and my great-grandfather, Remigio, later told them what my grandmother, Consuelo, had shared with the family back home. To my great-grandparents' surprise, the family confirmed every word. It was true. My great-grandparents were stunned. Eventually, the family saved enough money to move far away from these women. They even managed to buy a small house near their convenience store and never returned to that neighborhood again. Years passed. My grandmother grew up, met my grandfather, and the two of them got married. Together, they came to the United States in search of a better life. After receiving their visas, they settled in America, where they lived for the rest of their lives until they both passed away. My grandmother only shared the story with her children after they had become adults. Sadly, I was only 13 years old when my grandmother passed away, so she never had the chance to tell me the story herself. Years later, when I became an adult, my mother finally told me what had happened. I asked her why she never shared the story with me before. She told me, "My grandmother made one request. Never share this story with a child. Only tell it to an adult." Even after all those years, she was still deeply frightened by what she had witnessed that night. My mother's simply honoring her mother's wishes after she passed away. Personally, I believe my grandmother's story. She was never the type of woman to invent stories. She was a hardworking person who spent all her life providing for her family. She wasn't especially affectionate, but there was never any doubt she loved her family. She had been raised to believe that whether you are a man or a woman, your duty is to work hard and provide for those you loved. That's why I believe her, especially because many years later, my great-grandfather had a somewhat similar encounter while working alone in the fields at night in Mexico. But that's a story for another time. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, JP, for that story. We really appreciate follower stories that are sent in, and we appreciate you taking the time to tell us this story. And a thank you to your mother and grandmother for passing the story down. And with that comes the conclusion of today's podcast. As the flame is fading, the night grows darker. Thank you for joining us around the mesquite lantern. Keep your lantern lit, watch the shadows, and remember, not every story stays buried. Some stories come back to haunt.